The sun was just beginning to rise when Kamala Harris left the small guest house on the edge of town. She had chosen this quiet place to stay not as a politician, not as a former vice president, but as a woman who wanted peace. No cameras, no guards, no noise. Just her, alone, driving to a school event where she would speak to a group of young girls about courage, race, and rising above hate. She wore a plain blue shirt, black jeans, and sneakers. No makeup, no jewelry. Her hair, tied back, she looked like any ordinary woman on her way to work. That's how she liked it. No one recognized her in this small southern town, and that, she believed, made her safer. But she was wrong. As she drove down the empty highway, music playing softly in her car, a police cruiser appeared behind her. It didn't have its lights on, it just followed closely, too closely, looked in the rearview mirror and frowned. "Why is he tailing me?" she whispered. She signaled right, moved to the slower lane. The cruiser stayed with her, then the lights came on. Red and blue flashes filled her mirror. She pulled over calmly, hands on the wheel, engine off. The officer approached slowly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and white. His name tag read Officer Randall. His face was tight with suspicion. "License and registration," he barked. No greeting, no explanation. Kamala spoke calmly, her hands still visible. "Officer, may I ask why I've been stopped?" "Don't question me," he snapped. "Give me your ID." Kamala nodded slowly and reached into her glove box slowly, carefully. Officer Randall leaned closer. "You from around here?" "No, sir, just visiting." "What are you doing on this road?" "I'm driving to a local school. I'm a speaker today." The officer smirked. "You don't look like a speaker. You look like trouble." Kamala didn't respond. She knew this tone, this energy. She had felt it as a young girl. She had faced it in courtrooms. And now, once again, it was here on the side of a quiet road. The officer took her license and walked back to his car. 10 minutes past. 15. Kamala sat still, breathing deeply. Her phone buzzed. It was her assistant, asking if she was close. She didn't answer. Finally, the officer returned. "You got a nice car here," he said, tapping the hood. "Where'd you get it?" Kamala looked at him. "I rented it." "You rent it with your own money?" She raised an eyebrow. "Yes. Why?" He stepped closer. "Because people like you don't usually drive around here unless they're up to something." Kamala blinked slowly. "People like me." He leaned down, looking into her eyes. "Yeah, you know what I mean?" The words hung in the air like poison. Kamala didn't flinch. "Sir," she said slowly, "am I being detained?" The officer stared at her. "Are you a lawyer or something?" She didn't reply. He reached for his radio, but paused. Something about her calmness bothered him. She wasn't scared. She wasn't yelling. She was just still. He grunted. "You know what? Step out of the vehicle." Kamala sighed quietly and opened the door. She stood on the side of the road, arms by her side. Cars passed slowly in the distance. The wind picked up. The morning was no longer peaceful. Officer Randall circled her car. "What do you have in your trunk? Books, papers, a bottle of water? Open it. Do you have a warrant?" The officer stepped closer, now clearly angry. "Do you want to get arrested for obstruction?" Kamala didn't move. "Do you know who I am?" The officer laughed loudly. "Oh, here it comes. What, are you a senator? A princess?" Kamala didn't answer, but inside his dashboard camera still rolling, her quiet, steady face was being recorded. Every second, every insult, every word. Finally, the officer threw her license back into her hands. "You're lucky I'm in a good mood," he growled. "Now get out of here." Kamala got back in the car and drove away silent. But her mind was not calm. Not because of fear, because of purpose. She didn't scream, she didn't yell, but she remembered everything, and so did the camera. Elsewhere that morning, a local teenager named Maya was scrolling her phone. Her brother worked at the police station. That's how she got the body cam footage before anyone else. He had sent it to her as a joke. "Look how Officer Randall handled that lady," he had texted. But when Maya watched it, she didn't laugh. She gasped. "Wait," she whispered, pausing the screen. She zoomed in. "Is that Kamala Harris?" Her heart began to race. She was sure of it. She had watched Kamala on TV, in debates, in speeches. She admired her like a hero, and now some local officer had treated her like dirt. Within an hour, Maya uploaded a short clip to social media. "This woman is Kamala Harris. Look how Officer Randall treats her like trash." Within 1 hour, the video had 10,000 views. By the end of the day it had over 3 million. People were outraged, not just because of racism, but because of disrespect, power, abuse, and the silence of a woman who chose not to fight back on the spot but might be planning something much, much bigger. Back in the town, Officer Randall was called into the chief's office. The chief looked pale. "Do you know who that woman was?" Randall shrugged. "Some mouthy visitor." The chief slammed his hand on the desk. "That was Kamala Harris, you idiot." Randall's face turned white. "And now the whole world is watching." Meanwhile, Kamala arrived at the school. She stood in front of a group of girls, smiling. One girl raised her hand. "Miss Kamala?" she asked. "Why are you late?" Kamala smiled gently. There was a stop on the way. she said, but I'm here now, and sometimes the stops in life teach you more than the destination. The room clapped, but her eyes told a different story. A storm was coming, and this time, she would be the one asking the questions. The sun had set hours ago, but the lights inside the town's police department were still on. Phones rang nonstop, emails flooded the system, news vans began parking outside. Reporters with microphones and cameras knocked on the windows asking one question over and over. Did your officer stop Kamala Harris because she's black? Inside, Officer Randall sat in a small room with the police chief. His hands were shaking, he was sweating. A few hours ago, he was just another man on duty. Now, he was the face of a scandal that was growing faster than wildfire. The chief slammed his fist on the table. How could you be so stupid? Randall tried to speak. I didn't know it was her. That's the problem. The chief shouted. You didn't need to know. Look at how you treated her. Look at your face. The way you spoke, the body language. Do you think this is the 1950s? Randall stayed quiet. The body cam footage was already out there. He couldn't stop it now, and it was everywhere. News, outlets, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok. Even children were watching the video in classrooms, shocked by how a powerful, respected woman had been humiliated by someone with a badge. But the part that shocked them most was her silence. Kamala hadn't said who she was. Not once. She had let the officer dig his own hole. Calm, quiet, controlled, and now everyone was watching. Meanwhile, across the country, TV hosts debated what had happened. Would he have treated her the same way if she were white? Is this the America we still live in? She stayed calm, and that's what broke him. Some called it bravery, others called it patience, but one thing was clear. The camera didn't lie, and the truth was ugly. In a small apartment, Maya sat with her phone buzzing nonstop. She was the girl who had uploaded the clip. Her video had now reached 8 million views. News reporters wanted to speak with her. Strangers were thanking her for sharing it. Her eyes stayed on one comment. Imagine how many women this has happened to, but the world never saw it. Maya whispered to herself, but they saw this one. And it gave her hope. Back at the school, Kamala sat alone in a quiet classroom after her talk. The principal knocked gently. Miss Harris, would you like us to call security for your safety? Kamala looked up and shook her head. No, I'm not scared. I'm just thinking. She pulled out her phone. Dozens of missed calls, messages from her team, requests for interviews, demands for press conferences, but she ignored them all. Instead, she opened the video. She watched the way Officer Randall stood over her. The look in his eyes, the words he chose, the tone in his voice. It wasn't just hate, it was habit. A habit too old, too deep, and still alive. She sighed and closed the phone. She didn't want revenge. She wanted change, and she had a plan. That night, the mayor called her directly. Miss Harris, I want to personally apologize. Kamala interrupted gently. Mayor, I don't want your apology. He paused. You don't. No, she said. Apologies are easy. Change is hard. And I don't want you to take the easy way out. He swallowed hard. Then what do you want? Kamala spoke slowly. I want the officer, the chief, the department, the town council. I want you all in one room. No media, no press, just us. The mayor hesitated. Why? Because it's time someone tells the truth to your faces. Not in a courtroom, not on a stage, just across a table. The mayor was silent for a moment, then he agreed. The next morning, Officer Randall woke to a knock on his door. It was a fellow officer. Get dressed. You've been requested for a private meeting. Randall rubbed his tired eyes. What kind of meeting? The man replied with a dry smile. With the woman you pulled over? Randall's stomach twisted. Later that day, in the town hall's back room, a large table was set. The mayor, the police chief, and 5 senior officers sat on one side. On the other side, Kamala Harris. She wore the same quiet expression. No anger, no fake smiles, just truth. Officer Randall sat beside his chief, his jaw tight, his hands in fists. Kamala looked at them and spoke. I didn't come here to destroy anyone's job. I came here to hold up a mirror. She pulled out a tablet and pressed play. The footage began. Officer Randall's voice filled the room. People like you don't usually drive around here unless they're up to something. The room went cold. Some shifted in their seats. Others looked down. Kamala paused the video. Tell me something, Officer Randall, she asked. What exactly did you mean by people like me? He didn't answer. She waited. The silence grew heavier. Then she spoke again. You didn't know who I was. That's fine. But even if I was, nobody would this be how you speak to a human being. A mother, a teacher, a nurse. Still, no answer. Do you know how many women experience this kind of stop every day? Do you know how many don't have cameras to save them? Her voice cracked slightly, but her eyes stayed strong. I stayed silent that day, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted the world to see you, clearly as you really are. She looked around the room. I don't want you fired. I want you changed. I want your department trained. I want your officers to walk into black neighborhoods without fear in their hearts or guns in their hands. The chief tried to speak. Miss Harris, we have policies. Kamala held up a hand. Policies are paper. This is about people. She stood up. And the room stood still. I won't press charges, I won't sue. But I'll be watching, and the world will too. She looked directly at Randall. Now the question is, what will you do next? Outside, reporters waited, but Kamala didn't speak. She walked past the cameras, past the noise, and straight to her car. As she drove away, her phone buzzed again. A text from her assistant. You've gone viral again. She smiled, faintly, but she didn't celebrate, because this wasn't victory, this was just the start. For 3 days after the powerful meeting at the town hall, Kamala Harris said nothing. She didn't post online. She didn't speak to the press. She didn't appear on the news. The world waited for a loud response, but instead, she gave them silence. That silence was louder than any speech. People all across the country were talking. Some praised her grace. Some criticized her calm. Some begged her to take legal action. Others wanted the officer to be punished. But Kamala had a different plan. One that didn't need noise, only truth. In the small southern town, the pressure was building. The police department was under fire. Protesters stood outside the building, with signs that said, "Justice isn't optional." She could have been anyone. Change starts here. Inside the station, Officer Randall sat at his desk like a man frozen in time. He hadn't spoken much since the meeting. His confidence was gone. The jokes he used to tell had stopped. The smirk he once wore had faded. And now, he had questions. Big ones. He kept replaying the body cam footage in his head. Her voice, her stillness, her eyes not angry, but knowing. Why didn't she yell at me? He whispered to himself. Why didn't she destroy me? He couldn't sleep. His hands shook when he held his coffee cup, and something inside him, something buried deep, was starting to rise. Regret. Across town. In a small church basement, Kamala sat with 5 women. No cameras, no speeches, just listening. Each woman shared her story. One had been stopped by police 7 times in 1 year, just for looking suspicious. Another had lost her brother to a police shooting. He was unarmed. A third was once told by an officer that her child would end up in prison like the rest. Kamala sat quietly, taking notes, nodding gently. No judgment, no pity, only presence. She finally spoke. I've been in rooms with presidents, she said. But this is the most important room I've been in all year. The women looked at her, surprised. Kamala continued, because this is where real change begins. Not in courtrooms, not in headlines, but here, with real pain, with real people. The next morning, Kamala called the mayor privately. I need a favor, she said. The mayor replied quickly. Anything. I want a public listening session, she said. Open to the people. No stage. No security standing between me and them. And I want the officer to be there too. The mayor hesitated. Miss Harris? You want Randall in? The same room again. That could be dangerous. Kamala answered. I'm not afraid of danger. I'm afraid of silence. Meanwhile, at the station, Randall received a letter. It was short. Just a single sentence. You are invited to attend a community session on police behavior and justice. At the bottom. It was signed, Kamala Harris, Community Rebuilding Program. Randall read the note 5 times. His first thought was to throw it away, but something stopped him. A voice inside said, go, even if it burns, go. The day arrived. Hundreds of people came to the town's community hall. Mothers, teachers, veterans, students, young boys in hoodies, old men with walking sticks. It was a full room, not with anger, but with expectation. At the front of the hall, there were no fancy chairs, no podiums, just a simple circle of wooden seats. Kamala walked in quietly and sat down like everyone else. Soon, Officer Randall entered. Alone, no badge, no uniform, just a plain shirt and jeans. People whispered. Some stood up, ready to shout. But Kamala raised her hand. No yelling tonight, she said. We are here to speak, to listen, to feel. The room fell quiet. One by one, people shared their stories. Painful stops, lost trust. Children scared of sirens. Randall didn't say a word, but each story hit him like a wave. Then, a boy stood up. He was no older than 10. My name is Malik, he said. Last week, my dad told me if a cop stops me, I should lie down and not move even. If I didn't do anything, he paused. I don't want to lie down. His small voice cracked. I want to play. The room was silent. A few people wiped their tears. And for the first time since the video, Officer Randall stood up. He looked at Malik. Then at the crowd, and then at Kamala. I didn't come here to speak, he began, because I didn't think I had the right. He took a breath, but I heard the boy, and I want to say this. I didn't see a woman that day. I saw a color, a threat, a story someone else put in my head a long time ago, and I acted on it. He looked down at his hands. I was wrong. He was wrong. He turned to Kamala. You didn't destroy me when you could. You didn't shout when you had every reason to. Instead, you invited me into a room like this. He looked around the hall. I don't deserve kindness, but I want to change. I need to. Kamala stood slowly. She walked to the center of the circle, and she said one word. Then begin. Later that night, Kamala stood on the rooftop of her guest house, looking out over the small town. Lights were still on in homes across the street. Crickets chirped. The wind was soft. Her assistant walked up with her phone. You've been invited to speak on 3 national shows, she said. Everyone's talking about the town meeting. Kamala smiled faintly. I'm not ready to talk yet, she replied. But why? The assistant asked. Because this isn't about me, she said. It's about what they do next. She looked at the stars. Let's see who keeps listening. When the cameras turn off, the air in town had begun to shift. People who once walked with their heads down were now looking up. Mothers waved to police cars cautiously but no longer with fear. Something had changed since the community meeting. Something deep, but not. Everyone believed it would last. People pretend for a week, then go back to normal, one man said at the grocery store. They'll forget. A woman whispered, they always do. But Kamala Harris hadn't forgotten, and she wasn't done. 1 week later, white envelopes began appearing in mailboxes. No logos, no return addresses. Just one line on the front, you are invited. Please come. Inside the envelope was a card with simple words. A night of truth and listening with Kamala Harris. No microphones, no speeches, just stories. At the Old Town Theater Friday at 7 p.m. Come with open hearts. Come as you are. The invitations were sent to everyone. Teachers, retired factory workers, teenagers, police officers, nurses, even the mayor and the town's wealthiest business owners got one. One was even slipped under the door of Officer Randall. He stared at it for a long time, then placed it on the kitchen table. The old theater hadn't been used in years. Once filled with music, it had become quiet. Dust covered the stage. Seats were worn out. But Kamala chose it for a reason. She believed every place, like every person served a second chance. Volunteers helped her clean it, painted the walls, set up folding chairs, and most importantly, left the front row empty for the officers. Friday night arrived. Rain clouds covered the sky, but people still came out at first. Just a few, then dozens, then more. They walked in slowly, unsure of what this event really was. No stage lights, no banners, no cameras, only Kamala, sitting in the center of the front row. She wore a simple sweater and jeans. No title, no power games, just presence. One by one, the seats filled. Officer Randall came alone. His badge was in his pocket, not on his chest. He looked around and sat quietly in the back, unsure if he even belonged. But Kamala saw him, and she nodded gently. At exactly 7:05 p.m., Kamala stood and walked to the center. She didn't hold a mic. She didn't raise her voice. She just spoke. When I was a little girl, she said, my mother told me, you may be the first to walk through a door, but don't let it be the last time it opens. She looked around the theater. I didn't come here to lead a protest or give a speech. I came here to listen, to hold space for pain, for growth, for healing. She stepped aside and pointed to the front row. These seats are for the ones who wore the badge. If you're ready to hear us not as officers, but as people, please come, sit with us. The room was quiet. All eyes turned to the back, where Officer Randall sat. He didn't move. Then, one officer in uniform slowly stood, then another, and another. 4 officers walked down the aisle and sat in the front row quietly, nervously. Randall still didn't move. Kamala didn't force him. She just said, we begin now. The first person to speak was an old black woman named Mrs. Laverne. She held a worn purse and a photo of her son. My boy was kind, she said. He liked music. He was quiet. One day he was walking home, and an officer thought he was holding a weapon. It was a sandwich. He never made it home. The room fell still. A woman next to her reached out and held her hand. Then a young Latino man stood. I have been stopped 9 times in the same street. I don't deal drugs. I don't steal. I fix phones. That's my job. But I still get treated like a problem. Each story added weight to the room, but also something else. Light, people cried, nodded, whispered I'm sorry. Kamala watched every face, especially the officers in front. Their shoulders sank. Their hands trembled. Some wiped their eyes. Still, Randall sat in the back. Frozen. Then, a teenage girl stood. Her name was Zuri. I don't want to grow up afraid, she said. I want to be a lawyer like Miss Kamala. But when I see a cop car, my chest hurts. I want that to stop. She looked directly at the officers. I want you to see me like a daughter, not a threat. The room was silent then. For the first time, Officer Randall stood. He didn't walk to the stage. He walked to the front row, where the badge-wearing officers sat. He didn't sit. He knelt, right in front of Zuri, and he said one sentence that no one expected. You are my daughter. Gasps echoed across the room. Kamala stood slowly. She walked to Randall and placed a hand on his shoulder. He looked up, eyes full of tears. I saw my own child in her tonight, he said, and I realized I'd been blind. He stood again, turned to the crowd. I don't expect forgiveness, but I will earn it. The theater filled with the sound of clapping, not loud, not forced, just real, from people who understood that this was not the end, but maybe the start. Later that night, as people walked out into the light rain, Kamala stayed behind. She sat in the empty front row, watching the stage. Her assistant approached. That was beautiful, she whispered. Kamal, I nodded. It was needed. What next? Kamala smiled gently. We build? Something changed inside Officer Randall after the theater event. He didn't talk much about it. He didn't make speeches or post apologies online, but the change was clear to those who watched closely. He arrived at the station earlier than usual. He looked people in the eye more often. He asked questions he never used to ask. Like, was I too rough with him? Did we really need backup there? Are we stopping people because they look guilty, or because they are guilty? Some officers noticed, some didn't like it. One morning, Randall was standing near the coffee machine at the station when Officer Kemp, an older man with a tight jaw, spoke up. You okay, Randall? You've been walking around like a priest lately? Randall gave a small smile, just thinking more. Thinking. Kemp laughed. You mean letting that little theater stunt get in your head? Randall stayed calm. I just want to do the job better. Kemp leaned in. You're starting to sound like them, man. Next thing you know, you'll be kneeling at every stop. Randall didn't reply, but inside, something burned. Not anger, conviction. Later that day, Randall was called to a noise complaint in a low-income neighborhood. He had been to that street many times before. He used to walk in with his hand near his belt ready, suspicious, expecting the worst. But this time, he knocked gently. A teenage boy opened the door, shirtless, nervous. Hey sir, sorry about the music. Randall nodded. It's okay. Just turn it down a bit. We've got older folks next door. The boy blinked. That's it. Randall smiled slightly. That's it. The boy turned the music down and whispered, thanks for not being like the others. Randall paused, then walked back to his car, staring at the steering wheel for a long time. At home, Randall sat alone at his kitchen table that night. In front of him was a photo of his daughter Emma. Was 12, sharp, kind and biracial. Her mother, Randall's ex-wife, was black. He picked up the picture and whispered, if someone talked to you the way I talked to that woman, I'd break their jaw. He felt a lump in his throat. All this time, he had let the badge blind him. He forgot what it meant to protect, not control. He looked at the invitation from Kamala, again the one he had kept in his drawer. This time, he didn't put it away. He placed it on his fridge with a magnet. Elsewhere, Kamala Harris was back in Washington, but her mind kept returning to the town. She asked her assistant, can you check on Officer Randall quietly? Of course, her assistant replied. Why? Kamala said, because the hardest part of change isn't the first step. It's what you do after everyone stops watching. Back in town, Randall was about to face his first real test. It came on a cold Thursday night. He responded to a call at a gas station. A young black man was sitting outside with a backpack. He's loitering, the store owner had said. Won't leave. When Randall arrived, he saw the young man sitting on the curb, shivering. He looked about 19. Randall approached. Hey there, you okay? The young man stood up fast, hands raised. I didn't steal anything, I swear. I was just warming up. I don't have anywhere to go. Randall held up a hand. It's okay. No one's accusing you. What's your name? Tyrell. Tyrell, you hungry? The boy blinked. Yeah. Randall walked inside, bought him a sandwich, and handed it over. He didn't call backup. He didn't ask for ID. He just sat next to him and listened for 5 minutes, then gave him the address of a local shelter that Kamala had partnered with last month. As Tyrell walked away, he turned back. Why'd you help me? Randall replied. Because someone helped me learn how. But not everyone was happy. The next day at the station, someone had written in black marker on Randall's locker, blue stays blue. Stop turning soft. He stared at the words, wiped them off silently, and kept working. Later that week, Randall got a letter. It was from the young girl named Zaretha, one who had spoken at the theater. Inside was a drawing. It showed 2 people standing side by side, a girl in a yellow dress, and a man in a blue shirt, holding a sign that said, I see you now. On the back she wrote, thank you for hearing me. I hope more cops learn what you learned. Randall held the drawing to his chest and shut his eyes. Meanwhile, Kamala watched the news quietly. No headlines about the town, no flashy clips, just a short article that read, local officer seen sharing food with homeless teen outside gas station. She smiled. She didn't need to be there to know. The shift had begun, but not all hearts change easily. Late one night, Randall got a call. A fellow officer had stopped a young man, no reason, just suspicious behavior. Randall arrived to see the boy handcuffed on the ground, bleeding from the mouth. Officer Kemp stood over him. I told you to stay down. Kemp barked. Randall's voice rose, firm. Uncuff him now. Kemp turned, surprised. What? I said, take them off. This boy did nothing wrong, Kemp scoffed. Oh, here we go again? Mr. Civil Rights. Randall stepped forward. Uncuff him, or I report you myself. The 2 men stared at each other, then Kemp yanked the cuffs off and stormed away. The boy sat up, rubbing his wrists. Randall helped him up. You okay? He asked. The boy nodded. Scared. Do you want to file a report? Randall asked gently. The boy nodded again. Randall walked him to the car, and for the first time in his career, he drove a victim, not a suspect, to the station. It was a cold Saturday evening when Officer Randall finally stood in front of the tall white door of Kamala Harris's town guest house. His hands were sweaty, his chest was tight. He had knocked on hundreds of doors before, some during arrests, others for calls, but this one felt different. Heavy. Final. He raised his fist and knocked. No security. No guards, just the soft sound of footsteps on wood. The door opened slowly. Kamala stood there in a dark gray sweater and slippers. No makeup, no power in her posture, just warmth in her eyes. She didn't speak. She simply stepped aside. Come in, she said. Randall stepped inside like a man walking into his own past. The living room was simple. A small couch, a wooden table, a stack of books, a photo of Kamala with young girls at a school event. Everything felt peaceful, and yet his heart beat like a drum. Kamala poured him tea. She didn't ask why he was there. She already knew. He sat on the edge of the couch, unsure of where to begin. Finally, he spoke. I thought 1,000 times about what to say to you. She looked at him and nodded, but every time, it sounded fake, like an excuse. She stayed quiet. So, I just came to tell you the truth. Kamala folded her hands in her lap and waited. Randall took a deep breath. I grew up in a house where I heard things I shouldn't have heard. My father hated black people. He didn't hide it. He taught me that being kind to them was being weak. His voice cracked. He used to say, control them, or they'll control you. That stayed with me, even after he died. Even when I joined the force. He looked down at his hands, and for years, I believed him. Kamala's face didn't change. She listened. Fully. Randall continued. When I saw you that morning on the road, I didn't see a human. I saw everything I was taught to fear. He swallowed hard. But you saw me. You didn't scream. You didn't curse. You didn't pull rank. You didn't even tell me who you were. You let me reveal who I was. His eyes turned red. You let the camera show the world what hate looks like, and what grace looks like too. Kamala finally spoke. Her voice was soft but clear. You know what surprised me the most that day? He looked up. That you was so sure, so confident in your hate, like you'd done it before. Randall nodded, ashamed. I have. Silence fell between them again. Then Kamala leaned forward. I didn't forgive you right away. I was angry. I wanted to scream. But I didn't, because I've learned something important in my life. She paused. You can't change a man by screaming at him. You change him by showing him a mirror and letting him see himself. Randall nodded slowly. That's what you did? Kamala looked deep into his eyes. Then the real question is, what do you see now? Randall didn't answer right away. Took a shaky breath. I see a man who used to think power meant fear, but now I think power means healing. Kamala blinked once. That was all the response she gave, because she knew those words didn't come from his head. They came from somewhere deeper. Randall stood up. I don't expect your forgiveness. Kamala shook her head. Good, because this isn't about me. He paused. She added, this is about what you do now. With the rest of your time in that uniform. He nodded, and then, almost in a whisper, he said, I want to train the new recruits. Kamala raised her eyebrows. Slightly. Train them. Randall's voice steadied. I want to be the officer I never had. I want to teach them what I never knew. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter. I already wrote a proposal. It's for a program, Truth and Justice Workshops. Based on everything I've learned, he placed the letter on the table. I want you to be part of it. Kamala picked it up and glanced at it. No fancy words, just real, honest ideas. Weekly meetings with new officers, listening sessions with locals, bodycam reviews with emotional training. A new kind of police education. Kamala smiled faintly. This could work. Randall exhaled. She stood and walked him to the door before he stepped out. She looked at him one last time. You've taken the hardest step, she said, but the road ahead is longer than you think. Randall nodded. I'll walk it, even if it's alone. She smiled. You won't be. That night, Randall walked home under a dark sky. No crowd, no applause, just the sound of his own footsteps. And, for the first time in years, he felt something light inside him. Hope back in the guest house. Kamala sat on the couch, staring at the letter he left. Her assistant entered quietly. You okay? Kamala nodded. He's not who he was. Do you trust him now? The assistant asked. Kamala didn't answer immediately. Then she said, I trust what he's becoming. The small-town police academy had never seen a training session like this before. Gone were the old-style lectures filled with rules and warnings. Gone were the tough voices telling rookies, don't hesitate, don't trust, and don't get soft. Instead, Officer Randall stood in front of 20 young cadets with a notebook in one hand and a heavy truth in the other. He looked at the fresh, nervous faces. Some were white, some black, some Latino, Asian, and Native. They all wore the same uniform. But Randall knew what lived behind the badge mattered more than the badge itself. My name is Randall, he began. You already know I've worn this badge for over a decade. He paused. But what you don't know is that I used to wear hate too. The room grew still. I'm not proud of it, but I have to be honest with you. I stopped people because they looked wrong, not because they did wrong. A few cadets looked surprised. One even shifted uncomfortably. But something happened that changed me, Randall continued. And now, I'm here to help change you before you make the same mistakes I did. He wrote 3 words on the whiteboard behind him. Fear, power, respect. He turned back to the class. Let's talk about these. For the next 2 hours, Randall taught not just how to protect, but how to see. how to enter a neighborhood without assuming guilt, how to pause before pulling out force, how to speak, listen, and reflect. He used real videos, real stories, and most importantly, his own failures. The cadets didn't just nod, they leaned in, they asked questions, they shared fears, and something rare happened in that room: honesty. But outside that room, not everyone was pleased. Word had spread that Randall was changing the culture. Some called it bravery, others called it weakness. Officer Kemp, the same man who once mocked Randall, was watching closely, and he didn't like what he saw. Late one evening, Randall found a paper slipped into his locker. It wasn't a note, it was a transfer request signed by 2 officers from his department. They didn't want to work with him anymore. At the bottom, someone had scribbled in red ink, "You're more activist than cop now. Pick a side." Randall stared at the words for a long time, then slowly tore the paper in half and threw it away. Meanwhile, Kamala was traveling across the country, speaking at small town halls and schools. But her heart stayed in that town, watching from afar. Assistant showed her a short clip from the local academy. It showed Randall speaking in front of the cadets, pointing to the board where someone had written, "Courage isn't loud, it's steady." Kamala smiled. "He's doing it," she whispered. Her assistant nodded. "But not everyone's happy," Kamala replied. "They never are when change knocks first." One day, Randall received an invitation. It wasn't from Kamala this time, it was from the state commissioner's office. They had seen clips of his training, read letters from the cadets. He was asked to present his program at a statewide police conference. Randall was shocked. He had never spoken in front of more than 30 people. Now he would be speaking in front of hundreds. His hands trembled as he read the invite, but deep inside, he knew this was the moment. The day of the conference arrived. Randall stood backstage with his notebook. He looked over his notes again and again, heart pounding. The room was filled with top police leaders, training heads, sheriffs, and press. Some were curious, others were cold. One man even said, "So this is the soft guy everyone's talking about." Randall just smiled politely. He walked on stage, paused, then began. "I'm not here to make anyone feel guilty," he said. "I'm here to tell you what I wish someone had told me on day one." He told them about Kamala, about the roadside stop, about how he had looked at her and seen a threat, not a woman. Then he said the words that stunned the room. "That stop didn't ruin my life. It saved it." You could hear a pin drop. He spoke about fear and how it hides behind power. He spoke about training and how most of it focused on control, not connection. He spoke about his daughter and how he hoped she'd grow up in a town where officers didn't see her as a suspect. When he finished, some people clapped slowly, others stood. A few remained silent, but they heard him, and that was enough. Back home, Randall returned to his daily work. He still wore the same badge, but the way he wore it had changed. People greeted him differently. A little boy handed him a card that said, "Thank you for not being scary." A store owner gave him coffee and said, "It's on the house for standing up." And even though Officer Kemp still ignored him, some younger officers had begun following his lead. They asked him for guidance. They joined his training sessions. The ripple had begun one night. Randall received a call from Kamala. He hadn't spoken to her since their meeting. "I saw your speech," she said softly. He laughed nervously. "I was shaking like a leaf." "You shook the system," she replied. Then she added something unexpected. "I want you to speak at the next Youth Justice Summit with me." Randall paused. "Are you sure?" Kamala smiled through the phone. "You're not the man I met on that road anymore. The world should meet this one." As Randall hung up, he sat quietly in his kitchen. He looked around. Same walls, same uniform, but everything inside felt new. This wasn't the end of his journey. This was the turning point. It was the biggest event of the year. The National Youth Justice Summit in Washington, D.C., brought leaders, students, activists, and law enforcement officers together under one roof. The room was full of people who had experienced injury, others who had once caused it. Kamala Harris had spoken here many times before, but this time, she wouldn't speak alone. Sitting quietly beside her backstage was Officer Randall, the same man who once pulled her over for looking suspicious. The same man who had knelt in front of a young girl named Zuri and promised to change. Now he was about to speak on a stage where real change was born. Backstage, Randall sat nervously, staring at the floor. His hands trembled slightly. Kamala noticed. "Cold?" she asked with a warm smile. "A little," he admitted, "but mostly scared." She handed him a bottle of water and said softly, "It's not fear, it's respect for the moment." He looked at her. "How do you stay so calm?" Kamala replied, "Because I've already lived through the fire. Speaking now is just walking through the ashes." The host announced them. "Please welcome the former Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris," joined by Officer James Randall, a man whose story reminds us that redemption is real. The room stood in silence as they walked onto the stage. Some people in the crowd recognized Randall. A few frowned. Some crossed their arms, but others leaned forward. "Curious," Kamala began. She spoke briefly, not as a politician, but as a woman who had lived both power and prejudice. "I've been honored to serve in the highest offices in the country, she said. But one of the most powerful moments of my life happened on the side of a quiet road when a man saw my skin before he saw me. She turned to Randall. And that man is here today. A few gasps. Randall stepped forward, breathing slow, and then he told his story again, but this time, not with shame, with clarity. I made a mistake that day, he said, not just because I stopped someone who had done nothing wrong, but because I didn't see her as human. He looked around the room, but that moment didn't end me. It opened me. He told them how he changed, how he trained new cadets now, how he taught them to listen, to question, to reflect, and then he said something that made even Kamala turn her head. I used to wear the badge to feel strong. Now I wear it to serve even, if it means standing alone. The room stayed quiet for a few seconds, then applause started, not loud at first, but real, and it grew. From young people who had feared the police, from officers who had lost their way, from teachers and parents who saw hope in a man once broken. Later that evening, Kamala and Randall stood outside the building as the sky turned orange with sunset. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Kamala broke the silence. I never told you something, she said. What's that? That morning when you stopped me, I wasn't just on my way to visit a school. Randall looked at her, confused. She smiled faintly. I was going to speak to a mother who lost her son to a traffic stop gone wrong. I had no idea. That same morning, I'd nearly become another story myself. Randall's face tightened. I'm so sorry. Kamala nodded. I know. They stood on the sidewalk, just two people now, no titles, no cameras, just a man and a woman who had crossed a line that divided them, and came back changed. Back in town. Word spread quickly. The video of the summit went viral. Young officers across the country started writing to Randall. Activists who once feared cops now invited him to panels. The mayor of his town declared the first Monday of the month Truth and Justice Day in honor of the community healing and the young girl. Zuri sent him another letter. This time, the drawing showed her standing in uniform beside a peaceful, smiling officer. On the back she wrote, I want to be like both of you. One afternoon, months later, Randall was driving alone. Don't calls. No emergency. Just quiet. Then, he saw something on the side of the road, a broken down car. A woman stood beside it, waving. He pulled over slowly, walked up calmly. She looked up, nervous. He smiled softly. Need help? She nodded. He didn't ask where she was from. He didn't scan her for danger. He just opened the trunk, grabbed the jack, and got to work. As he fixed the tire, the woman said gently, Thank you, officer. He paused for a second, looked up at her, and said the words that now defined him. I'm here to serve, not to scare. Some journeys don't end with an apology. They begin with one. And from there, the road forward is made not of power, but of courage, humility, and the will to change.